Thank you. Hello. We've heard a lot about change, handling change and being more resilient through times of change over the last sort of couple of days, and there's a lot of stuff going on. But did you know Bain & Company, massive American research company, interviewed over 500 different businesses across all different sectors, all different shapes and sizes. And it discovered that businesses that embrace change and innovation achieve a 39% greater year-on-year increase in revenue compared to their industry average. Let alone those that fight innovation, that's compared to their industry average. But they also discovered that 88% of all innovation drives, so restructures, realignments, behaviour change programs, things that you're probably thinking of doing when you get back from all the stuff that you've learnt here, 88% of the time, businesses fail to reach their targets. And they discovered that that's because in 70% of organisations, our natural human fear of change blocks innovation. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about for the next 45 minutes or so, and about how farmers do that and maybe don't do that as well as they might and could do that a bit better. And if you have a look at everything we've learnt over the last couple of days, like even forgetting in your industry, just the stuff that Stan talked about this morning, like the geopolitical environment, that sort of thing, let alone, like I sat in the sessions yesterday, like facial recognition for sheep and stuff like that, just sensational. And I would suggest to you, the biggest gift you can give your business and yourself over the next 2 to 5 years will be building you and your team's ability to adapt and work together through continual change and upheaval. Continual change. This is not going away. But I went to boarding school with loads of guys from the land and went to Sydney Uni with loads of guys from the land. So I rang them, just had a chat about how things are going and talked about what I was going to talk about today. And they said, well, that's all fine. That's all well and good, mate. But my people feel like this. He said, the people over the last couple of years, particularly in lamb, like there's just prices going up and down. One of my mates said, my people feel depleted, like already, let alone the next 2 to 5 years. Another one of my mates said, look, you know when a bushfire goes through and the trees are all still there, they're still the same shape, but they're these hollowed out husks that if you leant against them, they'd just fall over. That's how my people are feeling right now. So what I'm going to talk to you about for the next 45 minutes or so is this idea of resilience through times of change. Resilience, how we handle things in here and in here. And the great news is, resilience got a bit overused during COVID, didn't it? But there's been about 40 years research into this idea of resilience. And they've worked out that it's about 50% genetic. So if you're a bit of a stress ball, blame your mum and dad. Only 10% events. Only 10% what's happening. 10% all the things that Stan has talked about, that everyone talked about yesterday in their sessions, only 10% what's going on, and a full 40% how you respond to things in here and in here. And the great news is for us today, there are psychologically proven strategies that anyone can learn to improve that 40%. You really can learn to reduce stress, maintain focus, increase productivity through whatever farming and life throws at you. But to do that, we need to talk very openly about how we think and about how we feel about life. Now, when I say to a big bunch of Aussie farmers and producers and suppliers, we're going to talk about how we feel for 40 minutes or so, I just want to check in with you and see how that lands, all right? I'm going to show you 3 photos. I want you to tell me by your response to those photos how you feel, talking about how you feel in front of the people in this room, all right? So when I say we're going to talk about how we feel, for about 40 minutes or so, there's going to be some people in the room who are sitting there feeling a little bit like this guy. It's like, got some motivational speaker in. Have a big group hug and talk about how we feel. There's going to be some people in the room, and please be honest if this is you, possibly more likely the blokes, when I say we're going to talk about how we feel, are sitting there feeling a little bit more like this guy. It's like, I'll talk about the footy, not how I feel. At a pinch, I even talk about fashion, not how I feel. And there's going to be some people in the room, and please be honest if this is you. When I say we're going to talk about how we feel for half an hour or so, are sitting there feeling a little bit more like this guy. Biggest response by far, okay. Who am I and how dare I stand up here and have a chat to you guys about the deeper aspects of life and business? I've got a book series out there called What I Wish I Knew, where I've interviewed over 1,000 people from all over the globe and asked them, if you could give your younger self one bit of advice about whatever that book's about, what would it be? And for our purposes today, like I've interviewed an amazing bunch of people, like some of whose stories we know. Like up top left, there's Anh Do, the Vietnamese refugee. Next to him, Naomi Simpson from Shark Tank. Next to her, Wayne Bennett, rugby league coach. Down the bottom right-hand corner, there's Julia Morris in the jungle with the celebs. Above her, Maggie Beer. Next to her, Mark Rasciuto. So some people whose stories we know. And like, it's nice. It's nice meeting those people. But more importantly, I've just interviewed people just like you and me. People who've been dumped in the deep end and had to go through some tough times and come out the other side with some wisdom to share. So I've interviewed cancer survivors, I've interviewed depression survivors, I've interviewed World War II survivors, I've interviewed 9/11 survivors, I've interviewed a Buddhist nun who works with prisoners on death row in Los Angeles, like just an amazing cross-section of people across all walks of life from all around the globe. And when you interview that many people and ask them that question, what advice you give your younger self, 11 familiar themes start coming up again and again and again. Obviously, you know, one of them is stay away from your cousins, but too early for that? All right, we'll get there, don't worry. But what I'm basically asking people is this, like how to get to here, how to get to the end of your days and be sitting there hand in hand with someone you love or by yourself if you prefer, looking back on your life with a big satisfied smile instead of a heart full of regrets. And when you ask that many people that question, a lot of people say it actually boils down to this idea. This idea, if you want to do life well, you've got to do pain well. And think back on those times in your life when you've been dumped in the deep end and your previous life experience hasn't prepared you for where you need to go and who you need to be to move forward. If you handle those times well, the good times kind of look after themselves, don't they? And in the workplace, in business, quite often that becomes do change well. And our brains have evolved to really hate change. Our brains have evolved. Civilization has come through so fast compared to how evolution works. Like there's evolution there. We're all familiar with sort of coming up like that. Last sort of 40 years or so, we're sort of going back down again like that. We're only just sort of getting up and walking around a little bit now. But so basically your brain has evolved for life like 100, 200,000 years ago, where things that are different could be dangerous for your physical safety. So your brain wants you withdrawing from them. But it's really just out of your comfort zone. Like for those in comfort zone, you'd know those are the people sitting right at the back up there, like just going, oh, I'm not sitting down the front. Well, people might see me. Like, because we do, like we just stick into our comfort zone, don't we? But according to over 1,000 people I've spoken to, the key to living that great life, that life that you'll look back on and say, you know what? Oh, I did all right, is just this. Fear less. Get out of those inbuilt fear mechanisms running around inside your brain that keep us withdrawing from things that are just a little bit different because life is so safe now compared to what it was 100,000 years ago. And I know we're at a conference, so we should have a hashtag, so I've made you a hashtag. Oh. Stunk up the place, all right, no worries. But that's what the 11 themes are all about. And after having a chat with about a dozen of my mates from school and uni, you guys are on the land, we're going to go through 4 of them today. 4 of them that are pretty appropriate for where you guys are at and what things are going forward with you. The number one thing everyone says about how to do life well and how to get to the end of your days and be pretty happy with how you've spent your time down here is just this. Life is change. And please understand, I'm not saying like, oh, isn't life full of change? Isn't change such a big part of life? No, life is change. Change is the very nature of existence. Put up your hand if you want life. Raise your hand if you want life. Raise your hand if you won't raise your hand no matter what I ask from up the front up here. Fellas up the back's going, nah. If you want life, you have to accept this. This is the Oxford English Dictionary definition of the word life. The condition that distinguishes animals and plants from inorganic matter, including the capacity for growth, reproduction, functional activity, and continual change preceding death. Continual change till the day you die. There it is again. Continual change. That's what life is. So if you want your business to have life, it has to accept that. If you want the lamb industry, if you want the sheep industry to have life, it has to accept that. There's no choice. And when you accept that life is change, you have to accept the flip side of that. And that's this. When you refuse to change, you don't hold on to the past, you just lose the future. Put up your hand if you've got kids. Raise your hand if you've got kids. Leave your hand up if, when you had those kids, you had a birthing plan all worked out with the midwives. Leave your hand up if your birth went exactly like your birthing plan. There's usually one smug bugger in a room this size, like sitting up the back there going, yep, just like on the spreadsheet, champion. Like, it's such a great metaphor for life because we make all these plans, don't we? Like, I love that old joke, how do you make God laugh? You tell him your plans for the future. Like, life never works out as we plan. My wife's a nurse, accident emergency nurse, and so her birthing plan was like, no doctors, don't want any doctors, even in the room. So we were booked in for this like midwife-led unit, which was attached to the hospital, but not in the hospital. And we went and had a look at it beforehand, and there were like, dream catchers up on the walls and motivational quotes and pastel colours and, electric candles so the gas wouldn't explode and all that sort of stuff. And we turn up at the hospital, we have enough food to last 3 days and enough Enya to last a week. Because my wife just loves the smooth, easy listening sounds of Enya. Oh, I freaking hate the smooth, easy listening sounds of Enya, but I love my wife and I'm not an idiot. Let's bring those 37 Enya CDs as it was at the time. So we turn up at the hospital. Within 15 minutes of getting there, sadly, undiagnosed breech baby. So the baby's the right way up instead of upside down. So we think we're going over here. It's like, the chanting and the birthing and the splashing and the meditating and everything. 45 minutes after getting to the hospital, we're here. We're in the operating theatre and my wife is numb from the chest down and the surgeon's about to open her up and do an emergency caesarean. Now, I think the anaesthetist can tell Ali's quite upset with how things have gone because she wanted to go that way. She's 180 degrees from that. And he leans down and whispers into her ear and says, oh, Mrs. Wilson, would you like me to turn the radio on during the operation? Would you like some music during the procedure? Now, my wife has these gorgeous big blue eyes, just looks up at me with this angelic look of intent and just says, wouldn't it be a sign if Enya comes on the radio? And again, like, I'm not an idiot and I love my wife. I'm just like, yes, darling, it would. So my wife is desperately hoping for a bit of this. Maybe a bit of this. Definitely everyone's favourite. Definitely a bit of this. But this song, at precisely this point in the song, is what they came out of the stereo.
First cut is the deepest. Baby, I know the first cut is the deepest.
Now, Ali's an accident emergency. Don't know if you know any nurses. She has a very dark sense of humour. She is shaking with laughter, like. But the poor anaesthetist thinks that she's crying, so he's like frantically trying to turn ended up like ripping the plug out of the wall. But we realised that, our real plan was to get one of these little guys. And there's my firstborn when they've just handed him to me. But you have to understand that life is full of moments just like that, where you think you're going over this way. I call it getting hit on the back of the head with the cosmic cricket bat. And you have to go this way. And it's up to you to adjust, like 10% changes. It's up to you to adjust the 40% in here and in here. Now, I know like in farming and agribusiness, there's a lot of facts and figures. I've seen a lot of numbers being talked about up here. So I've made you a graph. Now, absolutely no scientific basis whatsoever, but it's just a graph. I just sort of make you feel a bit comfortable and you'd be all right with it. But that's what life's like, isn't it? So every 2 to 5 years, life comes along and just kicks you in the teeth, doesn't it? Through unexpected relationship breakdown in our family, like unexpected economic fortune in our family, unexpected illness in our family, unexpected death in our extended family. That's what life is. And psychological studies show that people who deliberately choose to try and control that 10%, they try and kid themselves, they're in control of that 10%. Like we were talking before, someone said up here before about, it's not about, all that stuff is so out of our control. Remember Stan talked about all this stuff that's so out of our control. So let it go. Instead, people who deliberately choose to get out of their comfort zone more often and put themselves in difficult situations, they handle the natural ups and downs that are part of being a human being far better. So if you want to do pain well, I would suggest to you, life doesn't get easier, but you can get stronger if you go into the tough times in the right way. And I think that's why almost everyone I've spoken to for my book series has said that the second thing you have to understand if you want to do life well and do business well is you have to accept there will be tough times. And so we said in the panel up here before, a lot of farmers, they don't plan for the tough times. When there's a drought and that sort of stuff, they don't have their backup plan. That's so important to do. I interviewed Wayne Bennett for my book, and he said, if you want anything in life, you have to expect some tough times. Having 2 kids with disabilities has taught me that life's about doing your best, whether you're playing for your country, running around in C grade, or just trying to live through another day. Naomi Simpson said it really well. It's one very appropriate for the current times in which we live. She said, we work in this whole nice world where you go to a child's party and every kid gets a prize or they get upset. We need to understand that life isn't fair. This is important, Naomi says. Life is not fair. There are tough times, so dive in, learn the lesson, get a backup plan, like Jack said this morning, and move on. And everyone in my book, I wrote a book, What I Wish I Knew About Love. Everyone in What I Wish I Knew About Love said the same thing about the importance of understanding you'll go through tough times. Interviewed a guy called Matt Chandler. He was going out with this girl and she was the one. He'd secretly bought the ring. He was sending her flowers a couple of times a week. He snuck home from work one day to surprise her at lunchtime and found her and his best friend together. Oh! But when he was telling me about it, he had tears of laughter streaming down his face when he was telling me about how badly he handled it. But he said, you'll get over the most painful experiences. When you look back later, the worst things that ever happen will be the funniest stories you tell again and again and again. And almost everyone in my book, What I Wish I Knew About Love, said exactly the same thing, although most people actually phrased it this way. Thank the a-holes. Thank the tough times. Thank the cheating mongrel that you caught having dinner with your best friend. Thank the evil woman who left you drinking Bundy all by yourself at 2 o'clock in the morning and singing I Will Survive into a hairbrush. Because they're the people who who let you know when you've really found Mr. Right or Mrs. Right. And the same in your business career. I know most of the people in here are leading teams back at the coalface, back at their farms, back in their businesses. Thank the evil buggers that we all had when we were coming up through the ranks. Those evil leaders that we all had who taught us how to not lead people by their really bad example when we were young. Like those evil buggers that pull out all the cliches like, hey, there's no I in team, when they're the most selfish person you've ever met in your entire life. Someone actually sent me this the other day, because there actually is an I in team. There it is, hidden in the a-hole. That's not mine, that's just on the internet, so you can get that and send it to the person you were thinking of when I was talking about those bad leaders. I just saw someone taking a photo. I'll give you this whole slide deck afterwards, okay? So Esther and the team will send you this whole slide deck out. So ask yourself, what do you wish you knew? Ask yourself, when was there a time in your life when you thought your whole world was caving in, but it actually ended up showing you how tough you really are, or maybe could have even been the best thing that ever happened to you, whether it be in a business sense or in a personal life. It doesn't have to be the worst thing that's ever happened to you, but just a time when you thought it was going to go poorly, but it actually ended up pretty well. And I'm going to get you to turn to the person next to you and tell a quick 1-minute story. So start having a think about what that might be now. And for example, in my life, here's my beautiful wife, Ali, and my gorgeous 3 boys. Yes, I'm well aware I'm punching above my weight. You haven't got to tell me that. But there they are now, like the little one who, in the birth story at the start, like there he just dunks on me in the front yard now. And Ali doesn't mind me talking about this, so please don't feel remotely icky. Ali's had what she describes as an ongoing dance with depression and anxiety all her life. She had crippling postnatal depression after all 3 of our boys. Got so bad after the birth of little Charlie there, the gorgeous little blonde kid in the bottom corner. About 10 months after he was born, I came home from work one day and Ali just burst into tears over the dinner table and very quietly slid across the table to me the goodbye letters that she'd written to myself and all 3 of our boys individually. Now, I do understand that this is a pretty triggering conversation, and I do apologise for any hurt that this might dig up in you. But I don't apologise for talking about this really openly. I think it's really important. I know, agribusiness can be a really isolating business, and even just Ali said, when she had postnatal depression the first time, no one talked about it. And it's just moved on so much in 20 years that she really encourages me to talk about it. So obviously there are a lot of tears and some pretty brutal discussions over the next couple of weeks after that night. But that led me to contact the Black Dog Institute and ask them if I could write a What I Wish I Knew about depression. And so I got to interview about a dozen people from Black Dog, experts, including Gordon Parker, the guy who started it, and about 70 people who had been where Ali was, but had come through the other side to some degree. And some people want a copy. That's a free copy of that, martinwilson.com. So when you get the slides, that address will be there, martinwilson.com/depression. It's a free PDF of an extended version of the book, just to say thanks for having me. Give it if you would like it or if you know anyone who you think might benefit of it. It's a PDF, opens on any device, so please share that around if you want to. But I got to interview Ali for the book, and a couple of things she said were really appropriate for some tough times that I know we're going through at the moment. She said, when I told my psychologist I was very low, the most helpful thing she said was, look at what you've gone through. Of course you're feeling down. This last bit, being given permission to be struggling, was actually very empowering. If you've got someone in your life that you know is really struggling, and I know some of the guys this afternoon are going to be talking about this sort of thing as well, give yourself permission to be struggling. Give them permission after the stuff we've been through in the last sort of 3 to 5 years. Another thing she said was really great. She said, showing compassion towards my negative feelings and fears has greatly helped, as has self-hypnosis, meditation, and even just admitting to friends and family that I have depression. I'm learning to live with it instead of holding it inside and telling myself I'm weak. It's this last bit I really love. She said, now I've reached the point that I'm actually grateful for the lessons my depression is teaching me. Like most of the time, all of us in the West, and every time we feel down or bad, we run away and like eating, drinking, smoking, gambling, shopping, those what psychologists call avoidance coping strategies. But those strategies actually can become the problem. Every time Ali has had what she calls a wobble, instead of running away and doing that, she just looks that big, hairy, scary monster straight in the face and says, okay, brain, what do I need to learn about how you work to make the gap between this wobble and the next one even longer? And the great thing is, she's actually in a really great place. That girl on the right is so much happier than that girl on the left. It isn't funny. And it always feels really weird saying this in front of a big bunch of people, but we have the best relationship of any couple I know. We've had to hold hands and walk through the fires of hell 5 or 6 times in the last 15 years, and that hasn't been fun. It hasn't been Instagrammable. But the other side of that is just lovely. So I'm going to get you to turn to the person next to you and tell a quick story about sometime when you thought things were going to go really badly, but it actually turned out to be a good thing for you. And ask yourself, what did you learn about how to handle tough times that you can serve you now when you're going through tough times? Really extract the lesson from it. Now, I know this is really forced and really awkward and really embarrassing, so it's okay if the first words out of your mouth are, I hate this interactive crap. All right, go. Quick 1-minute story with the person sitting next to you. All righty, give the other person a go if you haven't already. All righty, could I get your attention back up the front, please? Get your attention back up the front. Put your hand up if you're listening. Put your hand up if you're listening. Oh, really works. Charlie, my youngest, said, Dad, try it. Our teacher uses it. It works all the time. Fantastic. Come in, guys. Come in. They just sort of look at that. Is it okay if I come in stance over the side there? In you come. Come on. Come on. Come on. No worries. Can we get you anything? Like a watch? That's old. So, a couple of things about that exercise. Firstly, understand, when you come along to events like this, like I said, agribusiness can be a pretty isolating business. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But just please make the most of wonderful events like this. A, keep coming to events like this, and B, make the, like, because I do a fair bit of this corporate speaking stuff, and you hear, the conversations over the bar and that sort of stuff are usually limited to like things like, oh, how's business going, champion? Kicking goals with both feet, big fella, don't you worry about that. I was like, just drop your defences and actually open up to people. If you need a bit of help, ask for help. Whatever you've got in your business that you might need a bit of help with, there's 100 people here who can help you fix it before you go back home. Like just, you get the most out of these sort of events and keep coming to these sort of events. The other thing is, you have to remember everyone has stuff going on. Through COVID, we could all talk about it and so it was all right, but everyone still has stuff going on. Like, put up your hand if in your extended family, you do not have a single dickhead. All right, now there's one person went to put his hand up and then realised no one else was and put it back down again. Got to tell you, I'm really sorry, mate, but in your family, it's you. All right. But everyone's got stuff going on. Like I was really close to my maternal grandfather. Like, like in Mediterranean families, the naughty kid gets sent to live with granny and grandpa. Like I was sent to live in the granny flat above our garage and like his wedding ring's built into my wedding ring. And he used to drive me crazy when I was a typical 14, 15-year-old idiot. And he used to drive me crazy by saying, your only problem is you think you shouldn't have problems. Everyone has problems. Everyone has stuff going on. Like that's but he's the key to it, he said, was how quickly can you get some perspective? I'm going to show you a couple of ways to get perspective. I interviewed a guy called Brian Egan. Brian Egan was a farmer. The Egan family farm was in his family for 5 generations. On his watch, through drought, he lost the family farm. And he had a complete psychotic episode and he couldn't walk out of his walk-in wardrobe for 2 weeks. The words that got him out of that walk-in wardrobe were this: a friend came round and said to him, find people who are worse off than you and help them. And he started that Aussie Helpers. Probably a lot of people in this room would have heard of Aussie Helpers. Sadly, Brian's passed away now, but they just go around and sit across the table from farmers and people in agribusiness and just let them have a talk, because it can be such an isolating place. So find something that fits in with your life story. Find people who are worse off than you and help them. Like, sadly, in my extended family, there's domestic violence, and in my wife's extended family, there's domestic violence. And I got 3 boys. I think it's incredibly important that they see me loudly and clearly saying domestic violence towards our wonderful women is just not good enough. So find something that fits in with your life, with your heart. Find people that are worse off than you and help them. I guarantee it'll give you some perspective. The other way is a lot more fun. I've got one of those, it's called an album in your phone, so I can text or email 11 people at the same time. If I'm having a really bad day, like you don't overuse it, don't do it all the time. If I'm having a really bad day, I email or text these 11 people and say, look, one of those days, show me I'm not the only one. I did it about 5 years ago, and this mate of mine who was living in Denmark at the time emailed me back. That's snow outside his front door. And during COVID, though, because my wife's English and we lived over there for 8 years, we emailed friends because they're having a really good summer over in London. It's like, oh, it looks like it's really good over there. Show us it's not all great. And this friend emailed us back and she said, look, oh, we are having a pretty good summer. But this morning I went out into my back garden to have breakfast and fell asleep. So whatever it is driving you nuts, find some way to laugh at it, like Zoom calls. How sick of Zoom calls are we now? Sometimes you turn up to a Zoom call, it's at midday, and you turn up at 7 minutes to, and you go, like, oh, what am I going to do? Google search or YouTube search, world's worst Zoom fails. Like, you'll lose 3 hours of your life, but I guarantee you'll be feeling a hell of a lot better. There's so many of these out there. This guy dialed in to do his call without putting his pants on. This other lady from Spanish TV dialed in to do her report over Zoom.
Sí, la parte del CISAT ya quedó, ya solamente tenemos que registrar autonomía curricular y el área socioemocional de los niños, porque esa parte no está quedando bien. Perdón.
I'll have her face, it's just like, it's over. This last one is my absolute favourite. This guy was appearing in court in Texas, and his niece had been on his Zoom the day before and put a cat filter on, and he didn't know how to take it off.
believe you have a filter turned on in the video settings. You might want to take
We're
a look.
trying to, can you hear me, Judge?
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
It is, and I don't know how to remove it. I've got my assistant here. She's trying to, but I'm prepared to go forward with it. I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
I can see that. I think if you click,
Like, how good is that? Like, I'm here live, I'm not a cat. Like, how good is that? When you can't get out of it, you've got to find some way to get into it. And then, like Naomi Simpson said, you can actually be grateful for the tough times. Dive in and find the lesson more quickly. Anyone here from the Central West? I interviewed Matthew Dickerson, your mayor, many years ago for one of my books. And he used to run one of the most successful computer businesses and phone businesses out of Dubbo. And the local paper wrote an article about him being a self-made millionaire. And he wrote an article back, a full-page letter back to the people of Dubbo saying, in the paper, saying that no one is a self-made anything. And he said in one of my books, when you're young, you think your success is all your own doing. As you get older, you realise how many people it takes to make even the simplest venture come together. Thank more people more often. And could I just say, on behalf of every Aussie who'll never bloody say it, could I just say thank you to farmers in general and agribusiness? It's like, oh, you guys cop a pizzling in the press all the time, Jane. Like, just like, and on behalf of all the Aussies who'll just never freaking say it, just thank you, all right? So, pleasure. So what is it people are really scared of about getting out of their comfort zone and trying new things? Here's some of the businesses I've worked with in the last sort of 10 or 15 years, helping their people embrace new things that have to happen, change programs that have to happen. And they say, look, everyone knows their job now. If they make mistakes, they're going to feel silly in front of their colleagues. Adults don't like making mistakes in front of other adults. But according to over 1,000 people I've spoken to for this book series, and some mates from farming that I spoke to before coming on here today, they said, make more mistakes. I mean, not ones like that where you've just been a dickhead, obviously, but ones where you're getting out of your comfort zone, trying new things. Remember that graph I showed you before? I interviewed a guy called David Thompson. David Thompson is the world's best Thai chef bar none. He's an Aussie guy. He has a restaurant called Sailors Thai and Darley Street Thai in Sydney. He opened a restaurant called Naam over in London. And Naam was the world's first Michelin-starred Thai restaurant. He opened one in Bangkok, and about 8 years ago, Naam Bangkok was voted Asia's best Asian restaurant as voted by Asian people. Like, that's how good he is. Like, the King of Thailand asked David Thompson to come to the Royal Palace and teach his people these 3 signature dishes that he's really famous for. So a little Aussie guy's going, oh yeah, give it a whirl, righto. And I thought, because he's the world's best, he'd be this tantrum-throwing Gordon Ramsay perfectionist, but he's so gentle and so lovely. And he said, stumble a lot and often, make more mistakes. Having made so many mistakes in my life, I've developed a lot more compassion for other people's errors, foibles, and weaknesses. Like, ask yourself, what's your favourite hobby? Your favourite hobby. If you had a day at home, you could do whatever you wanted. What would it be? Then ask yourself, how good were you at it the first time you tried it? The first time you do anything, you're really bad at it. Like, I love skiing, but the first time I tried it, I was really, really bad at it. If you're going to try new things, if you bring new processes back from LambEx and bring them into your business, you have to let your people know that your first one will be your worst one, and that's okay. This is the greatest era in the history of humanity to not care about making mistakes in public. Why? The internet. Every day we see people like being far bigger dickheads than you will ever be. Like Instagram, like Facebook, emails from our buddies, people being far bigger idiots than you will ever be. As long as you're just getting out of your comfort zone, trying new things. There's so many of these on the internet, it's not funny. Like, this guy didn't even get away from the pump in the first place. And this next one's up at Caboolture, near where I live now. This guy forgot to tell his wife he was doing a runner in the first place. Everywhere, there's people around there being far bigger idiots than you will ever be, as long as you're just trying new things. There's young kids being dickheads. Remember those chairs at school? He just stuck his head up through. There's old people being knuckleheads. There's ladies being knuckleheads. You can't even picture that, can you? It's like, how'd she grab it for a start? And then, and there's men being knuckleheads. That's a power board floating on flip-flops. I love the guy at the back. He's just like, how you doing? Huh? In fact, let's be honest. Every fella in this room, let's put our hands up and just say, there's a lot of men being dickheads on the internet. Everywhere you look, there's men being complete and utter idiots on the internet. Put that air conditioner in, Jen. Got your safety harness, Barry? Yeah, all good, mate, all good. My personal favourite. And this last one was taken through the front of a cafe in Johannesburg, apparently, this guy. So please understand, like, if you're bringing new stuff back, which I certainly hope you do from LambEx, let your people know your first one will be your worst one, and that's okay. Number one, life is change. Number two, accept there will be tough times. Like, embrace them, dive in, learn the lesson, move on, and get a backup plan for next time. Number four, make more mistakes. How many even notice that I skipped 3? It's usually about 10%. Because like we all walk through life, don't we, going, oh, don't make a mistake, everyone's going to notice. Don't make a mistake, everyone's going to notice. No, they're not. They're not even thinking of you. They're walking through their own life, going, don't make a mistake, everyone's going to notice. Like, I love it. There's a guy called Brian Tracy who said, do not worry what people think of you, for if you knew how seldomly they do, you would be offended. Like, they're not thinking of you. Number 3, make more mistakes. The number one thing everyone says when you ask them what advice they'd give to their younger self, over 1,000 people, this resonates and they say it again and again and again. And this is actually something farmers are pretty good at. Lighten up. We all get so serious, don't we, sometimes? Farmers are pretty good at lightening up at times. But like through tough times, like, you know, because can you laugh at anything? Can you laugh through the toughest of times? Like, for example, COVID. COVID was tough on all of us. But at times, humanity's response to COVID was hilarious. Remember at the start when masks were really hard to come by and everyone was doing the DIY thing on masks when they're going out in public? Like, all over the world. People like Southeast Asia. This guy obviously had no idea what his mask was for in the first place. The UK, this guy was asked to put a mask on. This was a guy in the US who was in the vegetable aisle and asked to put a mask on. And this one with wings. And so I would say to you, like, please deliberately go out of your way to remind each other that agribusiness and farming can be a really fun and funny business to work in. Go out of your way at these sort of events to make each other laugh. Like, I used to be a pharmacist. Back when I was a pharmacist, whenever I meet up with buddies from uni, we always swap stories about funny stuff that had happened in the white coat. For example, back when I was a pharmacist, estrogen patches were really big for female menopause for quite a while. And the instructions were almost always apply one every other day. Now, this lady that I knew really well started on them, and she came back in after about a month and a half and said, oh, I just can't use them anymore. I said, well, what do you mean can't? Like, they're usually pretty benign. And she said, oh, there's just no more room. Take one off, put one on every other day. Another time, this young, like 19, 20-year-old girl came in with a prescription for amoxil. That's amoxil. Everyone's had a dose of amoxicillin at some stage in their life. And she came in and said, oh, look, before I get this, I just want to check that it doesn't interact with something else I'm taking. And I said, yeah, fair enough. What else are you taking? And she said, oh, heroin. And I was like, if you're going to give one of them up. Last story. Who knows what that is? A few nods. That's Viagra. Totally clean story. Don't worry. This lovely little old couple in their 80s. This back when I was a pharmacist, Viagra had only just come out. And it was really expensive. It was like $140 for a pack of 10. And this little old couple that I knew really well was starting on it. And the gentleman came in to see me and he gave me a prescription. And he said, oh, look, can we get it on the QT? Can we get it on the quiet? But I don't want to make a big song and dance about it. I said, yeah, of course. So I went back to the back and did the prescription and came out the front to give it to him. And he's sort of huddling against the sunglasses stand at the end of the counter and everything. And he's looked down and he's seen the price of it because it wasn't covered on the national health because it was only new. It wasn't covered on pensioners had to pay full price for it. He's seen $140 for a pack of 10 and he's just exploded the top of his voice. $120 for a pack of Viagra? If I want to take this gorgeous girl to bed, the government should pay for me to take this beautiful girl to bed. And his poor wife's just standing there going, son of... I've paid taxes for 65 years to give this woman the night of her life. And in the end, I think the lady decided she better make the most of a bad situation, and she said at the top of her voice, "Don't worry, darling, that's a year's supply." So please, 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 you've shared some stories of tough times you've been through. Promise me, for the rest of your time here at LambEx, ask her, what's the funniest thing that's happened in your business? What's the funny, share funny stories that happen in your business with each other. Just remind each other how much fun and humour there can be in your business. I guarantee it will help. And now I get a bit of pushback on this sometimes, but no, business is serious. I'm serious. We're serious. Business is serious. I say rubbish. Interviewed a guy called Jim Hunter. Jim Hunter was an officer in the British Army for 25 years. I can't even tell you where he served. That he was sort of really elite sort of guy. And I said to him, "What's the secret of great leadership?" And he said, "That's easy. 4 words. Don't panic the troops." He said, when times are tough, we're going through stressful times, they need to look at me and see that little, he calls it that Buddhist half smile on my face that says to them, "Look, I've been through this sort of crap storm before. I'll get you through this crap storm now." And it makes sense, doesn't it? Like it fits in with what we already know. Like you go on like, eHarmony or any of those dating websites or the old ads in the paper back in the old days. What was the one thing everybody said their prospective life partner has to have? Good sense of humour. Everyone wants to hang around with people who have a good sense of humour. And psychological studies show that it means that person is psychologically safe to hang around. And that helps you lead better. And even just for yourself, laugh more, fear less. If you deliberately choose to flick the switch and find ways to laugh at things that are stressing you out, the research is massive. That it helps you say, it's like it says to your brain, well, I must be bigger than this if I can make fun of it. I must be in control of this if I can have a dig at it and lighten the situation. I would say, I know a lot of people are leading here. I would say leadership is too important to take it too seriously. Business is too important to take it too seriously. And certainly life is too important to take it too seriously. Please, take funny seriously. Finishing off, if you want to end up here, like I said at the start, if you want to do life well, if you want to get to the end of your days and be sitting there arm in arm with someone you love, looking back on your life, saying to yourself, you know what? I squeezed every last drop out of my short time down there on earth. According to over 1,000 people I've spoken to, you have to remember, it's a really short time. In what feels like a moment, we go from here to here. So stop trying to control that 10% that's out there. You can't. Instead, work on how you control things in here and in here. I love this quote. You cannot calm the storm, so stop trying. What you can do is calm yourself. The storm will pass. And I believe the best, or at least the most fun in the moment way to do it, is by using humour. If you don't trust me, trust a guy called Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl wrote, "Humour, more than anything else in the human makeup, can afford an aloofness and an ability to rise above any situation, even just for a few seconds." He was a psychologist who survived the concentration camps in Nazi Germany, and he said that. To put it another way, people in my book say if you laugh about it on your 80th birthday, start laughing about it now. Put it in a more Aussie way, then you can don't live between the flags. I mean, sure, at the beach, swim between the flags. If you go to the beach, swim between the flags. But don't live between the flags. Ask yourself, what's just outside the flags for you? Ask yourself, what's that little voice whisper in your ear when you're awake at 2 a.m? And then you can let this go. One last story. This mate of mine, we've talked a lot about lamb roasts over the last couple of days. This mate of mine, Sean Richards, his family used to be lamb farmers. They now live in Mossman in Sydney. And Sean, it's like the traditional Richards family Sunday afternoon lamb roast. Like if you're in the family, you have to go. Like trip to the hospital, blood or broken bones is the only excuse you can go to get out of it. And Sean Richards married this girl called Sophie. In Sophie's family, they had traditions too. In Sophie's family, the firstborn male child in every generation was called Richard. Now, Sean Richards didn't want a kid called Richard Richards. But he was so keen to get his lamb roast up every Sunday, he gave in. And little Richie Richards was born. Hey, Richie Richards, hey, Richie. It's quite a cool name when you're in primary school. Like, hey, there goes Richie Richards. Hey, Richie Richards, I'm Richie Richards. Hey. First day of high school, Richie comes home in floods of tears. He's like, I can't go to high school, please, Mum and Dad. And Sean and Sophie are just taken aback. They're like, what is it, mate? What's going on? I can't go to high school, please. And like, oh, I know it's a much bigger school. Not many of your friends went there. Like, I can't go to high school. Please let me go back to little school. And they're like, what is it, mate? What happened? He said, they call me Double Dick. Poor kid, he's 19. They still call him Double Dick, the poor kid. But because we've always done it that way is no reason to keep doing anything. The interviews with these amazing group of people that I've spoken to over the last 15 years or so have given me such a depth, such a richness to my life that I hope I've passed a little bit of on to you today. Life doesn't get easier, but you can get stronger. Make change a decision to be proud of, not a condition to be scared of. If you laugh about it on your 80th birthday, start laughing about it now. We've all come such a way over the last 3 or 5 years, everything we've been through. I would say, even though this mate of mine said his people were depleted, I would say we've actually got this reservoir of grit we didn't even know we had to face the challenging times of the future. I would say you haven't come this far to only come this far. So many people timidly tiptoe through life's twists and turns, then sigh with relief as they safely arrive at their grave. Please don't let that be you. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.